I got the note from Peter.
And
You
Will?
sent that along.
Yeah, I'll slide down one. So I don't feel like I'm at the other end of the planet.
Why don't we both do that?
That's what you mean.
Does that make it easier?
Sure.
One camera, he doesn't have to move the camera back and forth.
We're on.
There you go, Madam Chair.
Good evening, and welcome everyone to the February 7th, 2024 Yarmouth Planning Board meeting. I am Joanne Crowley, Chair. This is to formally advise that as required by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, paragraphs 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, signed into law on June 16th, 2021, the Yarmouth Planning Board will hold a public meeting on February 7th, 2024 at 5:30 PM. The public is welcome to attend in person this evening or via alternative public access provided on the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. I'll begin by taking roll call. Susan Britta.
Here.
Will Rubenstein. Jim Saban.
Present.
Peter Slovak. Ken Smith.
Present.
Chris Vincent. Joanne Crowley, present. Seeing that we have a quorum, I will now call the meeting to order and ask you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible.
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on our agenda this evening is a request for a lot release from agreement for definitive subdivision plan number 2511L. Is that correct, Kathy? L?
Aye.
I.
It's very confusing.
It's okay. I see we have a representative here with regard to this request. Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Daniel Christopoulos. I'm the present homeowner at 47 Nickerson Farmway. And I'm here to look for a release of the agreement that's on file.
Okay. Kathy, you want to walk the planning board through your memo to us? That would be helpful.
There were 4 lots that were created by this subdivision back in 2004, and all 4 lots have been released from the covenant, but there was 2 conditions included in the agreement that I don't think were completed at that time, so they were not released from the agreement then. But the 2 items there that are noted in the memo are for the Conservation Commission related to the proximity of the drainage easement, and then also we're recording a no-access easement. Both of those conditions have been met at this time. I've also coordinated with the engineering department, and they're fine with the subdivision, and they're fine with the as-built drawings that were submitted. So I don't see any reason why we couldn't release lots 1 through 4. Let's do all of them in that subdivision from the agreement.
Any questions or concerns from members?
None.
Okay. So may I have a motion then to release lots 1 through 4 of definitive subdivision 2251I from the agreement recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds in Book 17511, page 275.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Any other discussion? May I have a vote? Susan Britta?
Aye.
Jim Saban?
Aye.
Ken Smith?
Aye.
And Joanne Crowley, aye.
Joanne, I think they were hoping to close on Friday, so I don't know if there's any way we can coordinate for you to come in tomorrow?
Oh, sure.
And
no
get it
worry.
notarized? Okay,
Yeah, sure, I can come in and sign. We'll arrange a common time.
okay.
Get it out of the way.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming in this,
Welcome, thank you.
yeah, thanks for
Maybe
coming in tonight.
retirement. Connecticut with the grandkids.
That's pretty painful, huh?
Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda this evening is the draft regional housing strategy. There's a memo from Kathy in our packet for that. The Cape Cod Commission has issued their draft regional housing strategy, which addresses the issues of housing supply, affordability, and availability facing the region, and for each town has identified specific potential areas for and types of housing development, as well as some zoning bylaw changes to support their recommendations. The strategy plan is currently out for public review, and the comment period has been extended to February 16th. Since we will not have a meeting before that time, Kathy Williams, our town planner, has prepared a draft memo for us to consider to sending to the commission in advance of that deadline. She has also included in our packets the comments that have already been submitted by town staff. The commission will be making a presentation of the strategy to the Yarmouth Community Housing Committee at their next meeting on Monday, February 12th at 3 p.m., to which we are all invited. So Kathy, I'd like you to walk us through your thoughts on those areas of the strategy as outlined in your note to us, particularly related to zoning and wastewater, and how you would recommend we best provide our comments to the commission.
The document is it's very detailed, and there's also a lot of great links in there to other studies and reports that were done that help to inform the development of the strategy. So coming up with detailed suggestions on possible comments, not knowing exactly how you guys feel is a little bit more difficult. So I tried to take into consideration comments that you guys have made before, whether it was on the Affordable Homes Act, or I know concerns that you've expressed with regard to water and wastewater and mixed-use housing and that type of thing, and tried to take some of the staff comments and give you guys like a little more punch to some of the staff comments in support of those in the proposed comments that I have here. I think one of the first things that is listed here is whether you guys would be interested in kind of talking about water quality, housing, and economic development. This kind of follows a lot of the things that you had said during the Affordable Homes Act. And here comes Will. So really, just that the Cape is really looking to deal with our environmental issues, and we're having wastewater, we're expanding that, trying to solve those issues of housing in a substantive way. We're concerned that we might have some additional impacts to those areas. So we want to be sure that some of the housing is being encouraged in areas where we already have sewering or where sewering is going to be happening kind of in the near future. And kind of emphasizing that the Phase 1 in Yarmouth of our wastewater program is really along Route 28. So if we're going to be looking for any housing there, we really want to be promoting mixed-use housing and not having something that's taking up our commercial corridor and then impacting our residential tax base by taking away from commercial. So this first item is kind of talking about a lot of, I think, issues that you guys have discussed previously with regard to concerns about things going on in Yarmouth. And that kind of is also reiterating a lot of the comments from town staff as well, because you can't look at the environment in a silo and you can't look at housing in the silo. You kind of have to mend them all together.
Madam Chair, do you want comments along the way, or?
How would you like to proceed, Kath? You want comments on each one as we go through?
Be easier to do
Sure.
it that way?
Sure. Mr. Rubenstein.
Hey, Will.
I'd like to note that Mr. Rubenstein arrived at 6:43, 5:43, sorry.
If I can just,
Sure,
on what
certainly.
she said, I think, I read all this. Those first couple of sentences in the water, housing, and economic development really summarizes the entire issue. If we don't, you can't just address housing without addressing wastewater, without addressing the effects on the economy, the environment. And I think somehow there needs to be a collaborative effort to work simultaneously, if you will, or to collectively. And it's an example of where people who are advocating for housing need to also advocate for wastewater. And because without the wastewater, you can want housing all along. But so, if there's any sentence that I've read in this entire packet, it was that this really, to me, says it all, and that is that the three-legged stool of economic growth and development on the Cape are those three issues, and they've got to be, and if we can express that somehow, that they have to be moved forward in a collaborative way, otherwise we're not going to get there. That's my only comment on it.
Madam Chair, can I
Yes.
just pipe in too?
Mr. Smith.
Jim, I totally agree with what you're saying. I did have one recommendation or small change, Kathy, to the first sentence, where it says, that the Cape needs to address our environmental issues and expand wastewater before we can solve our housing issues. Well, wastewater is going to be a long time before we fix wastewater. I just thought it may read a little better, or kind of say everything you're saying is, as well as solving the housing issue. You know what I mean? It needs to kind of go hand in hand. It shouldn't be, we do need to solve our wastewater issues, but we do need to solve our housing issues. I completely agree. We should be focusing on the 28 corridor right now and look at mixed use, et cetera, because we do know that we're not going to be in the residential neighborhoods for sewage for a long time to come. But we do need to solve, that's why we spent the year talking about accessory dwelling and everything else. We need to, in conjunction with wastewater, solve our housing issue.
What if we, may I make a suggestion, Mr.
Please.
Smith? What if we say while we solve, or as we,
Yeah.
something along those
Yeah,
lines? But
that's-
whatever that is, I agree with your sentiment.
Or as we work to solve.
Whatever,
There you go.
there you go. Now we're heading in the direction I think that Mr. Smith is talking about.
Okay, good. Any other comments on?
Like, based on Jim's, did you want to make any, like, final statement? Or do we want to direct the commission to advocate for, or anything along those lines with regard to working collaboratively or collectively, or working with the state, or advocating? I think I tried to talk a little bit about that later under advocating for state action. So maybe we're fine with that, with just that one edit? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think as we go through it, Kathy, as we hit each bullet point, we may have adjustments.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
So the second item has to do with local zoning strategies. The draft regional housing strategy plan offered 3 different zoning strategies. They call them recommendations. I think they're more like suggested strategies for the town of Yarmouth to help promote housing production. I kind of put a little caveat in here saying that even though the planning board is going to offer some comments on that, obviously any zoning initiative needs a serious public involvement process, and you guys are just kind of offering some initial comments. The first item there, the strategy they had, was to allow mixed use by right in business district with near-term planned sewer connections. I don't have any issue with that. I think that's kind of perfectly in line with what you guys had been suggesting all along, and is actually a suggestion of town staff during a previous draft. We already have a lot of this already in our hotel motel overlay districts and our BCOD. So I think I thought it was a good one, the way they had it worded, and just kind of give them a little, we have no issue with that. Makes sense.
Everybody okay?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Number 2, the second strategy was to allow by right conversion of single-family dwellings to duplexes in residential districts. This originally had included triplexes, and during previous staff discussions with the commission, we just went through the accessory apartment where people were having a serious problem with allowing a smaller version to be able to convert homes into duplexes or triplexes would be a serious concern. Obviously, it also has to do with the wastewater item that we just discussed as well, and kind of emphasizing that that's not coming to the residential neighborhoods anytime soon. But then also saying we do, however, concur with town staff recommendation to replace this strategy with establishing a Mass General Law Chapter 40B smart growth zoning district in appropriate locations, which is more in line with the goals of promoting mixed-use opportunities. It's also part of that economic study that we are going to be doing with the community planning grant that we had to take a look at our village center and seeing whether there's some things that we can do to kind of spruce that up into a Chapter 40R, or whether there's some other locations in town where we want to try and promote those smaller, higher residential mixed-use developments.
There's just a little typo in the first,
I
at the end
got
of
that one
the
circled.
period got moved inside.
On the district.
Yep. So,
Any comments on that?
I mean, I think he said it very clearly, and we heard it very clearly throughout the last year and a half.
I just want to check in with, Susan, yeah, please, you don't need to raise your hand, just jump in when you want to make a comment.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I think the board is well aware of the sentiment of the residents in Yarmouth. So I always get nervous when it says, we don't have any problem with this, when in fact we sort of really do. We're very, not skeptical, but we're very cautious about, the density issue, I guess is the way I would phrase it. I think this is okay. I just don't like the notion that allowing duplexes by right, just because it's in a residential neighborhood. I don't think that's anything that our citizens would support. I mean, just my personal opinion. I think it's okay. I have a more broader question, though, for Kathy before we proceed. Kathy, what happens to this document? What does the Cape Cod Commission do with this document? Where does it go?
Yeah,
To a folder.
that's a
That's what I
good,
thought.
I
So,
think it
mean,
kind of is almost a little bit in a certain degree, kind of like a work plan for the towns and a work plan for the commission on things that they would also be looking at. They had, state advocating for things and also working on maybe some of these regional things that they're talking about.
Okay,
So just wanted to be clear that the comment here is saying that the board do not agree with the strategy of allowing by right conversion of single-family dwellings to
I think she was
duplex.
talking about letter C more than she was letter B.
I think so, too.
Right.
Letter C doesn't really say, it says will not result in, but it doesn't really say we don't like,
Doesn't,
it
because
doesn't
I-
say we don't like this.
Yeah, because I didn't know exactly how you felt on that. And I also don't think you're going to have a significant number. I was trying to point out is when we were looking at that chart on residential lot sizes, I think only 7% are 40,000 square foot or higher. Maybe you have a little bit more that are 25,000 square feet or more. So there wouldn't even be, doesn't even mean we have to do anything. This is just that we're not
Commenting on it.
vehemently opposed to it, like this is insane, which I think B was a little bit like, yeah, no, we don't want to be promoting that. But this, I don't think, is almost somewhat more in line with some of the things we had talked about. And I think Jim's the one that brought it up. You can by right do a duplex in some places that you couldn't do by right with an accessory apartment, depending on the size of your lot. I do think if you have, one thing that we didn't really talk about in the ADUs, but it's really going to also limit the amount of work that people do, is if you're in a floodplain.
Right.
And if you're doing more than 50%, and we didn't really talk about this, and it probably would have been a good argument for, another layer of ways that we were going to be decreasing to a certain extent the number, or not necessarily decreasing, but regulating or limiting in some fashion the number of accessory dwelling units, because not everyone wants to spend more than 50% of the value of their home, because then you'd have to upgrade if you're in a floodplain and meet the building code requirements, which would be extremely expensive. And again, this would probably be the case in the 25,000. So it's a general comment. I just don't, how you guys feel about it for discussion.
Want me to go first?
Sure.
I really have no problem with by right, and I think we've had this discussion many times over the last year and a half about by right and special permit and all that good stuff. With regards to 3, I see no issue with it. I mean, you're meeting all the current residential lot size setbacks, et cetera. Have fun. If we don't start doing something creative about our housing, then nobody will live here. So, I mean, we can be restrictive all we want, but we're going to restrict ourselves right into economic ruin. So I'm fine with, in my opinion, that allowing duplexes by right in residential districts, it's okay by me.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would follow up and just say, as written, 2C is just a statement of what we believe is fact.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you're approaching it, Kathy. Whereas 2B and 2A had much more opinion.
Right.
And I am comfortable with that in that context, as well as I do agree with Mr. Saban. So I don't think we need to start injecting opinion into letter C when there's really no reason to, because the facts are the facts, which is folks that are allowed to do it can do it, and at the same time, it's a very small number of parcels. So I don't think that puts us in any danger of, either now or down the road of making an opinion that isn't based on fact. We're just saying these are the facts, and we're much more concerned about letters A and B. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I
Yes, Mr.
completely
Smith.
agree with Mr. Rubenstein's statement right there and Jim's comments, that it's such a small number, and these are the facts and what they are, and that's where it stands. I don't have any issue with it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we express the fact that, the people of Yarmouth really have spoken with regards to the issue of, my opinion isn't necessarily obviously what swayed anybody's opinions, not even in my own house. But the people of Yarmouth have expressed their opinions that they want a special permit. And I think that's what we need to say, regardless of what I think. But, town meeting has expressed that we'd prefer a special permit process.
And this part of the memo doesn't prevent any of that from happening.
Right.
No, right.
And that's what I want to make sure that, that Susan hears, is that none of us are saying that we're trying to go back after the last 18 months worth of discussion about the special permit process. But where it is by right, it's by right, and that's a fact.
Any other?
Just so you know, right now, to do a duplex, you need to have twice the minimum lot size.
80,000 square feet.
So,
Oh.
just so
okay
you
then.
know. That's a little, that's why I wasn't sure if you knew that.
I think there's like less than probably 5 vacant lots.
There was 7.
7?
There
Yeah,
was 7 lots.
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
7 lots.
that are undeveloped. That could be 7 in the entire town.
7%.
No, there was undeveloped lots that meet this, that you could do this on.
If you were to go throughout town to find lots that would be 80,000 square feet to be able to do it, there are only 7 left.
I believe that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I believe that.
Right.
Yeah.
There are more that have already been developed, but
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
and of those 7, there are probably some development issues on some of those anyway. That's why they haven't been developed yet.
So I just want to be sure that you understood. That's what the story was. And so,
Anything else on this?
No.
Okay.
so number 3 is kind of talking about things about, in the strategy, they talk about things that they should be advocating for state action. You know, Bill Scott had added, the assistant town administrator had added something in the staff comments about, you know, you're mandating, we do all the sewer, and then you're mandating all this housing. How are you meshing those two mandates from the state in our community? And I think one of the things that we didn't really talk directly about in the staff comments was, you know, we have a state revolving fund loan that has, based on the requirements, have a 0% interest. We have to have these land use control regulations, which limit the amount of sewer and development we can do in our town. And it was based on, you know, a build-out analysis. And that build-out analysis did not include the state coming down and mandating or requiring or allowing all of a sudden by right a bunch of different things in our community. So that maybe what they should be advocating for is, if this is the case and you really want to do this, we also need to talk about maybe expanding the allowed allocations so that you can have specifically for housing. Because we don't want to be drawing that away from our economic development that we want to be doing. So that's what A is all about. And then B, the Affordable Homes Act, one of the other things in there is basically they're saying they want to advocate for the Affordable Homes Act, and they actually talk very specifically about the by right ADUs. And I just wanted to comment that, you know, that's not necessarily the feelings of every Cape Town, as you can tell by the town of Yarmouth. And then I would recommend attaching the comments that we sent to the legislators about the Affordable Homes Act and the concern we had about the ADUs.
I think that's fine. I think it is important to attach what we've already said about the Affordable Homes Act, and to keep that right in the front,
Agreed.
and not lose sight of that. Whenever we can comment, I think Mr. Saban's comments about looking for the Housing Assistance Corporation as an example to advocate on, when asked, for sewers. When they ask us to advocate for housing under certain circumstances, we have done that for them, as well as the Cape Cod Commission. We should all be advocates for those things that are really inseparable. They're really inseparable. So, and whenever we can afford to, or whenever we have the opportunity to repeat what we said before, I think it's a good opportunity to do that. So I'm glad that, I'm pleased that our comments on ADUs are going to be attached.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Susan?
No,
Okay. Do you have enough, Kathy, to?
Yeah, I think what I'll end up doing is I'll probably do another, a memo from the entire planning board to the commission, and then I'll just run it by you,
Sure,
and then we should be
sure.
good.
We can get it in before the
Sorry.
comment period.
Kathy, there was a typo. Towns, 3A, second line. It's towns, there's no apostrophe. Only because my 7th grader just had to go through this exercise in her ELA class. So I've had to relearn possessive. And I'm still learning, but it did catch my eye.
I did work on this highly medicated with Dayquil and NyQuil, so
TMI, we don't need to know what you're medicating on.
This is a judgment-free zone.
from my sick bed.
This is a judgment-free zone, but this is why, despite your excellent effort with the medication. You want to have fresh pairs of eyes and healthy eyes on these things.
I just feel bad because my mom was an English teacher, and it just hurts me a little bit to do her bad, you know?
We've all hit the keyboard in the wrong way. That's what you can always say that.
The people of Denison Yarmouth are thrilled to know that their children are being educated properly, as well as evidence of where to properly put a comma.
Yeah, or an apostrophe.
The question is, do they know how to diagram a sentence?
Now
That's
you're
gone.
now you're dating yourself. But Madam Chair, I do have a question about this, though. If I may bring it back to relevancy, which is not always my strength.
Yeah.
Were you going to discuss anything about our housing profile, or are we just moving on? Only because maybe I just never paid attention to what. Maybe because it's only been 3.5 years since I started serving that I haven't seen this housing strategy, or if I did, I apologize 3.5 years ago. But I just wondered how. There's a lot of really interesting information in here, and it comes from a group whose primary job is to have their heads deep into the data. Whereas, Kathy, as you know, you probably depend, as does every town department in some ways, on the quality as well and the depth of the information that you get from the Cape Cod Commission. And I guess what I was wondering, Madam Chair, if I may ask, these 3 pages, the housing profile, those 3 pages to me feel like something that should be shared, put forth. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just that they're pretty valuable pages, especially for folks who live in our town who may not want to wade through the stuff that we all have to wade through as planning board members, meaning the strategies and all the other good stuff. Not to mention, of course, a couple pages before, which I really do appreciate. They're very cool, graphically oriented approach. The key findings page. I mean, just to know that you have to earn $210,000 a year in a household to afford a medium-priced home, which we all know has gone up into the mid-6s or 7s, excuse me. So I just feel like it is partly our job to help our town, and I know that's an understatement, but in this particular case, I can see why people might come across this and go, oh, Lord, look at all this stuff. But I really feel like there's a lot of juicy tidbits. Now, of course, this whole idea about community activity centers, we could have a whole hearing about that. But I found that interesting as well, as how the county looks at our town is not just valuable because it's another organization that also cares about Cape Cod, but it's also valuable because it's a legislatively created organization whose job it is to provide data to each town, right? Isn't that part of their job? I mean, part of their job is to do this work. And I just feel like it's valuable. I'll shut up now.
It's a very good point, because the housing profile actually isn't even in the regional housing strategy. It's a click. You have to go to the housing.
Oh,
so
right.
This is a separate document that I just thought, I printed it out.
I'd forgotten that.
It does have great information in it. What I can do is I can talk to Mary Wagon about it. I know that she has I don't know what she has on her webpage, but she probably has the HPP, and maybe she could even have some of this.
Again, only because, as you know, sometimes it's hard to wade through large documents, even for folks who are motivated to. And certainly that key findings, the guiding principles, okay, but the key findings page and then the 2 pages, I would assume Mary would also be keenly, intrigued. Whether or not she agrees with all the data, okay, that's another conversation, I guess, for another committee. But there's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of really good information in here. I mean, one of the things that we touched on, mixed use, housing stock in Yarmouth, 0% is mixed use.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there.
That's not true.
Well, that's what this is saying.
But Mr. Smith brings up a good point, which is, it is then incumbent upon our planning department to politely push back onto the Cape Cod Commission and say, hey, you're putting this out into the universe that says this is what's going on in our town.
It's it's a matter of rounding. I mean, we don't have a ton of it.
Right.
So
it's
probably in
less than 1%.
comparison.
Less than 1%.
It's good, right.
Oh, I see. But they did allow for 0.3 for extra large homes, Jim. So I guess it's less than 0.3.
And you say that the data's good.
Like a Big Mac.
To have data, but what's the source of the data? And this is all, I'm sure, a lot of this is all through the assessors and how things have been categorized through our assessing.
I'm looking, there is some DO, I mean, the age and race stuff, you can see where that that is.
Right,
That we
exactly.
kind of all know.
But I think the current housing stock, I think a lot of that is coming from,
Let's say assessors data and CCC housing typology analysis.
yeah, I don't know.
That was the housing stock one.
And, even like the activity centers, they had a bunch of criteria that they decided was important for an activity center, and then they went to each town and tried to see what areas in town had those particular, like
yeah.
walkability, so the South Yarmouth Village, kind of made sense to that. So you just have to be very careful about the data as far as how it's used.
Can I point out one other thing? It did say under accessory dwelling unit by right. Did you notice at the very bottom, there's an X where it says not allowed? And I was wondering, are they still allowed to say that?
Well, it's not allowed by right,
Oh, no, it's not allowed by right. Okay, so they're making it a very,
negative.
yeah.
Pointing out that they want you to make it by right.
No, right. So it's, yeah, they're putting the answer into the question or whatever I'm trying to say.
Right, so accessory dwelling units allowed some way, yes.
Right, because
By
nice,
right,
nice
no.
folks would look at this and go, wait a second, did we just spend the last year and a half and didn't we go to town meeting in October and say, yes, we can have ADUs?
But hopefully they know what by right means now, because we gave them a
We
little
certainly
spiel.
did. We certainly
If they'll pay attention, they might.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to
No,
talk
no,
about
it's-
this
good
info because,
comments.
again, this is a pretty important body on the Cape. That's an understatement. It does a lot of different things, and here they are saying, hey, Yarmouth, this is what we think of you.
Right. Well, they established this cookie cutter, and this was several years ago. Kathy and I met with Christy Senatori and her staff, and we went through this cookie cutter approach. And I believe, and I can look back to see what I might have said then, was that a cookie cutter isn't really the best way to look at each town. We're unique in many ways, but this is how if you go to
It's the
Brewster, it's
same
going to be
matrix,
exactly
right.
the same thing. Zoning ADU dwelling by right will be a no.
The same pictures.
It's,
It's a broad brush.
it's
the region should do.
it's their cookie cutter to keep us all, how do they think we can all look the same, I guess,
Right.
comparison-wise, so.
Wellfleet
it
will
is-
never look like Barnstable.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
And again, Madam Chair, without knowing all the history, I don't want to make it sound like we must, blast this information either in Mary's case on the website or any other way. But it could be an opportunity, maybe even just for these key findings are certainly, when you come from a Cape-wide approach, are pretty sobering.
Yeah.
And are worthy of, folks really understanding and being aware of. Not even to mention the demand and the supply. Yikes.
Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
may.
Mr. Smith,
Just a-
Mr. Saban.
Just a couple of things. I think it's always important, and, I think we started part of it with the accessory apartment issue was identifying the problem. I think that was part of our problem, was trying to get people to understand that we truly have a problem. And how we conveyed that information sometimes wasn't as clear, apparently, as I thought it should be. But this type of information, that the more we can educate the community, the better it is. And one of the things, I just happened to flip this, earlier, Mr. Rubenstein had said that you need over $200,000 to buy a house today.
Yeah.
Well, on this page right here, it says that 11% of the top population of Yarmouth, 11% makes $200,000 or more
Right,
in a
yeah.
household.
Yeah, there it is.
So 90% of us couldn't afford to live here today.
Right. That's,
If we were in the market.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, 90%.
and we wonder why the younger population is leaving the Cape in droves? That
Living
number
with their
right,
parents.
that number right there says everything you need to know.
And no, ADUs do not solve the entire problem, yet
Absolutely
they
not.
are one little piece of the tool belt, as I think you described it maybe a year and a
My
half.
slice of pie.
That too. It is a small slice of filling that 90% of the pie. And it may only be, 8% or 12%, but then the pie becomes slightly more.
But I think these data points are important, that if, maybe we take advantage to the TV that we have Comcast pay for, that, this type of stuff gets put up every so often that says,
Yeah. The one that jumps off the page to me, estimated housing demand is projected to outpace supply by 11,000 to nearly 22,000 housing units by 2035.
That's like tomorrow, isn't it? It's
I think so.
much.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But you're right, there's some really good tidbits in here, and I think if we can expose that by maybe putting it on the community access channel, just as, reminders to people of what we're dealing with. And that, I think it's important that we all, when you start looking at this, you can see why the three legs to the stool need to work together.
And it is unfortunate in the top row, in the middle one, that they say there's been a 60% median sales price increase. What they really, what I preferred is that they actually put the numbers up there. Because I think it was, 440 in 2019? 460? Right? And, 60%, I can do that math, that's 20, yeah, so that gets us 700.
And just to look at the units for sale, I mean, pre-COVID, there's 2,500, 3,000 units Cape-wide. That's not even 1,000 now,
Yeah.
Cape-wide.
Oh, the whole Cape, I think it's like 700 right now.
Yeah, not even 1,000.
So I mean, that number is scary when you think of 60%, but it's still not quite like, well, what does that actually translate to in dollars? But
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, it probably didn't because it's a moving target. The median changes, and it's kind of like the national debt clock, it keeps going higher and higher and higher. Median price keeps going higher and higher and higher.
Kathy, is this Barnstable County? Because
Yes,
The key-
yes,
got
this
it,
is all
okay.
Barnstable. Yeah, I just tried to pick some of the highlights from the plan. And I think you're right, a lot of these graphics are kind of easy to understand, kind of where they were heading and what they were doing. I also think, they're going to be giving a presentation, the commission will be giving a presentation at the Community Housing Committee, and I'm sure that can also be put on public access. And they're pretty
right,
good,
of course.
they're very good with their PowerPoints. I'm
Yeah,
sure they'll
sure.
have a nice presentation.
And I would assume there'd be some back and forth, or time for questions and discussion.
Yeah.
Right, in that group, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, that's this
Yes.
Monday at the housing?
Yes, February 12th, 3 PM
3
here.
Here, I
Here and
sent
here.
out today also the link as well, in case you want to watch it.
Okay. Maybe I'll sneak out of work early that day and come.
Oh, you can sneak onto your computer. I won't
Do
tell
one
anybody.
less tax return. Okay. You got enough, Kathy, for this? Okay.
so.
Terrific. Thank you for all of your thoughtful comments here. So we have, next up are just meeting minutes. May I have a motion to accept meeting minutes from January 17th, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Susan Britta?
Aye.
Will Rubenstein?
Aye.
Jim Saban?
Abstain.
Ken Smith?
Aye.
Joanne Crowley, aye. Any committee updates? from
Yes,
anyone?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Rubenstein?
So, I wrote this down again because I think I said it at the last meeting. And maybe Mr. Smith, well, I know he agrees with me. But the wheels of sewer justice turn slowly. They do. So it's been another month since the last meeting. We did have one on Monday. And I guess I would say the wheels are turning slowly in the right direction. So to be specific, I know the mailing has gone out on South Shore Drive, and actually some of the work has started to be staged on South Shore Drive. And we're imminently waiting for the go-ahead to actually start work on South Shore Drive. And then in the next few weeks, contract 3, which is going towards the Parkers River Bridge, those mailings will start to go out, and those folks will start to get notified. So that's progress. But, we're also in a situation where we're building parts of a system before we're building the plant to where all the stuff is going to go. And so that is a concern. And we are starting to run out of time, especially when you consider the SRF and the 0% money, as we indicated earlier in this meeting. That turns into a pumpkin literally on Halloween, how appropriate, on October 31st. So we have construction documents that have been approved and bidding documents have been approved, construction plans, I should say. There's been no release for bidding yet on this beautiful, I'm going to call it what it is, which is a septic treatment plant. And I think many members of the WRAC are concerned, and if anybody watched the select board meeting from 2 weeks ago, they're concerned too. So I don't think it's reached crisis levels, but we're at the point where if the plant doesn't get bid soon, then the contracts are not going to be able to be awarded by 10/31, and then, not to mention, let's say we get the septic plant bid, and the bids come in, and we're going to be looking at north of 207 million, which is the magic number that was approved at town meeting a couple years ago. So I think, again, I'm not here to be the bad guy. I'm here just to report the facts, like Will Rogers has once said.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Exactly, sort of. The other guy. But that was Jack Webb. But I knew what you meant. Will Rogers said, I don't make jokes. I just watch the government and report the facts. So it was on my high school yearbook page. Anyway, so I'm here as your representative to the RAC, and as Ken would have done if it was him, to say, I'm not making jokes, but I am going to be the guy that's over the next several months going to say, this is what's going on. The good news is, as part of the working group that I mentioned in the previous meeting, there have been more working group meetings. As a matter of fact,
With the state
with the
representative.
state and
With the state at the
with the
table.
state at the table, and also with some of our elected officials' offices at the table, which is a small wrinkle, and hopefully that's because of what they heard when they were sitting right there 2 weeks ago at the select board meeting. They heard it all right, and they sat there and said, we're concerned. And so apparently some of those folks, if not them, their reps have actually been at those working group meetings. The other small bit of progress, like I said at the beginning, the wheels are turning slowly. The state has now said, well, it may not have to be 1/10 of a foot for the discharge, meaning the depth. Would you do an analysis, Mr. and Mrs. Consultant for the town of Yarmouth, at half a foot, and do an analysis at 1 foot? So that's some progress. So hopefully what that means is that we're going to get to the place where we can do the analyses, give them back to the state, have a couple working group meetings, and they say, okay, we have enough to at least grant a temporary permit or a permit with conditions, which would then free up the building to get bid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, all of these little Jenga blocks that you're either pulling out, putting in, hurdles, dominoes, whatever metaphor you would choose to use. Like I said, there's progress on certain contracts, and actually work is going to start to happen, and I'll be happy to also share that work can only be done until Memorial Day, and will stop until, and then resume after Labor Day. And the town is very much on top of it, and of course has met with fire, hospital, police. It's all being coordinated.
And may I add, not
Yes.
just with this town, also with our neighboring towns, because the ambulances drive through Yarmouth, so making sure that when we start digging up Route 28, that they have a plan.
Exactly. And also, I just would like to repeat, the golf course will, the good news is, my understanding is, the pond at Bayberry is going to get filled with all kinds of yummy water that is treated, that can then be turned around and used to irrigate. And that's great. And I think there's no question at this point that not only will Bayberry continue to see more use, not just for what it's doing in an existing way, but certainly with whatever the state decides to do at the septic plant, we're going to be driving a bunch of water, or getting a bunch of water, or pumping a bunch of water. The water is going to be moving back and forth with the golf course more than I think we initially thought. And also, the state-owned land that's just off Exit 8, right at the corner of Union Street and White's Path. I think the good news is the septic plant comes out right by the feed store there, and there is a big main that they can hook up to and just sort of get, without having to come at first I was like, oh, we're just going to come up Station Avenue, which now has a 950-person school that it didn't have, et cetera. They said, no, we can just come out the back of the plant. So it's starting to shimmy, but it's got a lot more shimmying to do. And again, we're only talking, hello, nice people out there, about phase 1 of 8 phases. And it's not clear, as again, respectfully, there's so many smart, kind, hardworking people that are working on this, that our friendly septic plant is only right now going to be handling phase 1. And I think we also have to mentally prepare ourselves for, at some point, the conversation is going to be for an outfall permit into a body of water. It's going to happen.
That's a long way off.
No. Well, we're going to see. It's not, again, this is not an opinion. This is just what I'm hearing, and It's a question of when, not if, and hopefully in Ken's case, he's right, that it's down the road a lot farther. It will remains to be seen, Madam Chair, how the state, again, they're kind of plowing the ground while they're driving the airplane and trying to change the oil. And on the highway, all the metaphors are being mixed together. And so I will commend our staff, especially the DPW and our consultants who are doing outrageously good work
Joanne, can I ask a
in
question?
conjunction with. Sorry, that was a very long report, and I apologize, but there's a lot going on.
Susan, you have a comment or a question?
I just wanted to ask, when do you think it will get to the crisis point? Considering the contract, you have to let the contracts and give, obviously time for submissions and review.
Yeah.
What's your best guess about the most critical drop dead date?
Well, it feels like, it's a good question, Susan. It feels like, from what I've heard from the consultants at the RAC meeting, as long as the bidders can be bidding in May and June, that there'd be enough time for the back and forth that normally would go on when you're bidding a project of this size, to then allow time for the contract to be awarded by 10/31. But that all can't happen until the state, through this working group, grants the groundwater discharge permit. So
Right.
I'd say the next 60 days are pretty crucial to get us to May 1st, roughly. And if we can get some resolution from the state and get the permission to then go bid, again, these documents are ready to be bid, but they can't be bid yet. So I would say if I'm still telling you in May that we don't have a groundwater discharge permit, I think there would be concern. That would start to be legitimate concern. And I will also say that, Bob Rittenhour is at every one of our meetings, and he obviously, as well as the DPW, and certainly the Select Board, will also be, of course, adding their own special brand of impetus.
Will,
Does that help you, Susan?
yes, can I ask one other question?
Certainly.
Does the state have any review on the awarding of the contract? Do they review it in any way, or is it strictly a Yarmouth deal?
I don't believe the state is involved in the bidding and awarding of the contract, but unfortunately, they are involved in terms of getting us, freeing the town to be able to award the contract.
Okay.
Susan,
yeah,
the only
okay.
thing that the state's involved with is the physical discharge permit and approval of the engineering reports and the engineering of the plant and all that stuff. But as far as the bidding goes, it's all done at the local
All
level.
local. Okay, good.
Which of course
Okay.
is run very well and very tightly through the DPW and our consultants. So that's good.
Yep.
So hopefully I'll have more good news and the wheels will start to turn quicker, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Will.
Sorry for the lengthy.
No, I appreciate it.
And I do think, it felt like, sorry, last thing. It felt like the Select Board is now, feels like they're concerned. And so hopefully they'll be able to, I think they even said, man, maybe Jeff should come back more often and give us more updates. It feels like, at least through Bob and his updates, maybe Jeff doesn't have all that time to make presentations. But certainly, Bob, I would say, for those of you that are listening to this that are also concerned, the Select Board meets every 2 weeks. The RAC only meets once a month. And so to hear things a little more timely basis besides my natterings would certainly behoove you to tune into the Select Board meeting as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other committee reports?
As the Drive-In Site Utilization Committee Chairman, I only have to say, I feel your pain.
I mean,
What did you say?
I feel their pain.
feel your pain. Well, yeah.
Nothing worth having,
Responsible as you did, though.
but nothing worth having, we've got to work for this, and.
Oh, of course.
And we'll get there, hopefully. But again, one of the things.
It's a clock, though, Jim.
Following back to what I said about housing, I think it's just as important, and maybe this is I don't know why I'm even saying this, but another example of why it's important to educate our community about what's going on. I mean, for the selectmen to find out at a hearing the stuff that they probably should have known going on. So I think there's an opportunity for the town to look at communicating, what the issues are that the town faces and how we go about, wastewater it's the biggest issue we've got. But we also need to educate about housing, because the question is going to become, okay, now you got this water, what are you doing about your housing?
and
Well,
they're-
that's going to fall on us.
And they're interlaced. as we
So,
discussed.
again, educating the community about that issue, and how it's important, and how all these things relate together. I mean, you can have a three-legged stool, but if you cut 3 inches off one leg, then it ain't any good. So, I appreciate you giving us this educational update, and I'm hoping that our town fathers are hearing me plea that more education to the community about all of the issues that we have, I think are beneficial. So, but thanks for that.
You're welcome. I mean, it's an 8.5-month clock.
Joanne, could I ask a question? Didn't we just hire a director of communications?
Yes, we did hire a director of communication.
Are they involved at all, Will?
Yes, Bob has said, Bob and Jeff, on the micro level, in terms of working with the process of communicating with the folks on South Shore Drive, as well as the 28 portion that's been awarded to the Parkers River Bridge, and also on a more macro level, Susan. So they're definitely aware that what you're asking about and what Jim just mentioned, like, there's more, we have to continue to almost over-communicate. Especially because, again, if we get to the summer and the bids come in and the numbers are, I'll just say north of 207, and remember, we also have 3 other contracts that have to be, sorry, 3 other contracts that have to be awarded after the plant, that are all part of Phase 1, and Phase 1 was 207.
That's why we need to educate the community, because if it is or, we need to be able to ready to say, hey, by the way, remember all the stuff we told you? Well, we don't need 201, we need 301, or whatever that, but you got to educate your community.
Mr. Rittenhour did say at our meeting that, there are obviously contingencies built in. He said, and I can't remember how exactly he said it. He said, but they aren't, he said something like there isn't a ton of fat in those contingencies. So, and of course, we all know things are more expensive, and if this project had been bid when Ken was serving on the rack, when we thought it was going to get bid, which would have been, let's just say, 6 months ago, give or take, perhaps those numbers would be much lower, and we certainly wouldn't be having any of these conversations about that we're turning into a pumpkin on October 31st. Hopefully less, a $206,999,000 pumpkin.
Any other committee reports? I have none. I don't have a meeting until,
We have our next capital
week, I
meeting
guess.
is the 19th of the month, so I'll have something to report next meeting.
and you'll be back to CPC, right, on the 21st? Are you coming back on the 21st?
Yeah, I was just telling Jim that we extended the bid opening for the drive-in site to the 22nd of February, so we're not going to have bids before the 21st. So I don't know what that means for that meeting with CPC.
I wasn't withholding, I just don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
It wasn't purposeful, it's just like, oh, no.
Well, public bidding is complicated,
Yeah.
especially when you
We'll
have
get there, we'll get there.
different types of construction, so.
But is there a hard and fast date for that in terms of financing and money and things like that? In other words, just a contrast, or is it similar?
It's similar.
Similar. Is it October
Some of our
31st
grants.
or is it a different?
It's similar.
Is it a 12-month from the grant award? How does it work? From the grant award date, or does it work differently?
We have some grants that are out there that have expiration dates that can't be extended. They're in 2025.
Okay.
And they're for portions of the project, that hopefully we can get completed before those deadlines. So we're okay, but we need to
Get the
move
clock
this
moving,
process
yeah.
along.
February's the shortest month. It'll be May any second.
Oh, we got an extra day, too.
Get an
know,
Get an extra day this year.
Still a couple of days short.
Taking the extra day, Will.
And we're loving it. And we're loving it.
We need it.
Anyone else? Okay. Any staff updates, Kath, from you? You and I talked about at least one.
Yeah, just a quick update on the open space and rec plan. We were going to be going before the select board at their next meeting on the 27th, but it's going to take a little bit more time to work through some of the comments, mainly the ones from the Division of Conservation Services. Was looking for some more detailed information on our recreation properties, like how they were funded and and grants that were for so
Who's asking these questions, Kathy?
DCS, yeah.
DCR.
DCS, Division of Conservation Services.
Oh, okay.
So we have our conditional approval, but we'd like to be able to wrap this all up and answer the questions from from them, as well as, the comments we got from the planning board and some other people before we go to the board. So we've extended that to April 2nd. That gets us past annual town meeting and all the budget stuff and all the stuff that they're going to be busy in March with anyway, and also gives us time to have an open space and rec ad hoc committee, sometime in the middle of March to wrap that all up. So we're getting there on that, so that's good. And then just kind of an update on the local comprehensive plan. We have awarded the contract to the BSC Group. They have a planning division. We're very impressed by them and the work that they've done with local comprehensive and master plans in other communities. The contract is in progress right now. Hopefully, we'll be sending that out for DocuSign this week, and hopefully, if all of that goes well, I'd like to get them on board and still, again, ideally have our kickoff meeting, our second meeting in March with them, if we can if they have time to get everything all together, but probably no later than the first one in April. So we'll get that kicked off.
Kathy, what's their total timeline? I mean, when do?
We were looking at fall of 2025 for the fall town meeting.
Okay.
And then, once that gets approved at town meeting, then going to the commission and getting their certification.
Okay.
So progress.
Progress.
The wheels are turning slowly.
Again, yeah, that's right. In the right direction.
Yes, in the right direction.
And our next meeting, Kathy, on meetings.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, on the 21st, we did have that small article to extend the sunset clause for the short-term rentals. I do believe there was a quick run-through of the draft warrant last night with the select board. I don't think they had any specific comments on that, but obviously we'll be going before them. And on the 21st, we're having our formal public hearing. I don't anticipate there being a great deal of discussion. I think probably we were a little too short in our time frame anyway. But I am interested in hearing more from the select board when we get before them. What are your concerns about short-term rentals? So do you want to have, the Housing Trust was maybe potentially looking at having a similar study as was done in Provincetown to kind of evaluate those impacts. That was what was in the HPP, that comment about not coming with any predetermined conclusions. So see if that's something that they want to have done and kind of present it all together. I don't know whether they're thinking, they being the select board, of any general bylaws, kind of like Provincetown did, or what. It's going to probably be beyond stuff that might be specifically zoning related, but let's just kind of talk about this all together cohesively and kind of come up with a game plan, so.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I can, I neglected to make this mention in the member notes. I'd like to appeal to the public. We all understand that a member of the board is leaving us. If you'd like to take the opportunity to serve your community, be involved in the planning board, be involved in the future of your community, go to the selectman's office and fill out a talent bank form. We'd love to have you join us.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate
That's
that.
my public service
There we
announcement for
go.
the day.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
May I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Certainly.
I just wanted to, there has been some progress on something that I'm glad to see progress on, which is the Mattakese Reuse Committee. It seems like it's starting to shimmy a little. It almost feels like, before the big Kentucky Derby starts, or the Preakness in my case, they get the horses, they're walking the horses up to the gate. It feels like the horses are getting walked up to the gate now. And actually, they have a gate, or gates. The thing I don't quite understand is why, and I don't know if you were engaged in that conversation, Madam Chair, or Kathy was, why the planning board doesn't have a representative on that committee. It seems odd to me. I do agree that the CBC and the Finance Committee make sense for them to have a representative on that committee. But given the magnitude of the decision and the direction in which this committee will shape the future of that property and its impact on the town, as well as the way this committee functions, with it being having its very lovely manicured hands in so many different pies, speaking of pies, Jim, I'm disappointed. I just wanted to express that we weren't given the opportunity, not that we're all looking for more work, but it would just seem to make sense from a 25,000-foot view perspective. Yes, finance, yes, CBC, but it would also seem to make sense for a member of the planning board to also be a part of that 7-person group, making to put in a lot of work to look at a very important property and to help shape the future of, that side of town? I don't know how else to say it. So I just wanted to express my.
Big swath of town.
Thank you. Not to mention it being adjacent to one currently operating school and the police department and the rail trail and. And so I'm excited, again, like the horses are being led to the gate, and hopefully that committee will start to meet. And I have a lot of faith with Mr. Scott and Mr. Rittenhour to help guide it. But I think it was a missed opportunity.
I admit I don't watch a lot of Tuesday night drama. Did they create a committee and select individuals to serve?
I think the charge has now been approved.
Oh, did that get?
That was the way I interpreted what I saw. And that's been obviously the effort of Mr. Scott and a lot of people. And the good news is, at least from what I can tell, they're not starting from a blank slate, because that could be a 10-year process. Instead, what they're doing under Mr. Scott's direction is he suggested a couple of pathways. And I think that's a much wiser path, big picture approach than just saying, okay, it's a blank slate. What should we do there? Should we put it in an amusement park? As opposed to, well, there's an educational path, there's a recreational mixed-use path, there's an economic development path. But at least that starts the conversation. And I'm excited to see who those folks are that are going to get to be in that conversation over the next couple of
They
years.
haven't been appointed yet.
But I don't believe so.
No.
But at least the charge, my understanding is the charge has now gone through the process it needed to with the consultant to get to the select board to now get approved. But again, as part of that approval, and I'm not sure why I didn't mention this several months ago, Madam Chair, so I also take some blame as to why we couldn't have advocated for ourselves. And that isn't anybody's fault. I just wanted to point it out that this process is now about to start, and we will have very little to do with it formally. Obviously, informally, we are members of this, we're citizens of the town of Yarmouth, and I guess we could say, hey, I'd like to be a part of that. So, I don't know.
Might I suggest that we could send a memo to the chair, the appointment, I don't know if they've already decided who those seats are.
I have no
There
idea.
might be a memo that suggests that, the planning board would suggest that a member of the planning board be a representative on this committee. That might be one of your approaches. I know that,
I was more asking you to think about it. I wasn't asking
no, I
anybody
think
to
it's
write a
important.
letter.
I think it's totally
I
important.
think we should let them know that, hey,
I defer to the chair.
Well, I think if this
Charge
is,
has been approved.
Sorry?
If the charge has been approved, that specifies who.
It does. It says CBC, Finance, and 5 at-large members. It was very specific, which is the reason why they had another conversation, 2 weeks ago, because they were very concerned about conflicts of interest of the at-large members, which again speaks to another reason why maybe having a planning board member be one of the 7 members, because you would think with the Finance and the CBC folks, those people would not have a conflict of interest. They would be looking at it from a perspective of through their committee lens. So it was so that would have decreased, by 20% the number of people who could have been a potential conflict of interest. So I don't believe we can do anything, but
when was this charge approved? At the most recent?
Yes, the most recent
Last week.
meeting.
Town meeting.
Not
Last
Tuesday,
night?
but 2 Tuesdays.
night?
I think it was
Oh,
2
was it 2
Tuesdays
Tuesdays?
ago.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
I do not know.
I know it was on the agenda 2 Tuesdays ago for that one reason. And I respect the fact that they don't want to have conflicts of interest, especially if there's an economic development pathway to be discussed for, let's say, 2 years, and make a recommendation. I get that.
I think
Or housing.
there's some concern, I think if you do planning board, then do you need to do someone from CEDC? Do you need to do someone from recreation? So I think maybe that might have been part of the thinking. Plus, I think a lot of it was developed, from Bill Scott, who may not be as familiar with, all the great work you guys do on other committees, and that type of thing. Because obviously, he's more interested in obviously, you can see how finance and capital budget were the ones that were included. So
I don't deny that those
And
other
it could-
committees are
and
important.
it could
but-
also be that, why not broaden the population who will sit on these committees and
new people.
new ideas.
Of course.
So I can see there are some pluses to having it unassigned, if you will.
Yeah.
Except for those 2. But it's piqued my interest to go back and check the select board meeting and find out what's going on.
Well,
If there is a charge, if there's something in writing, I want to find out what it is.
It's in the agenda of the meeting
You can
from 2
ask
weeks ago.
the town administrator's office whether there's an approved charge, and they'll be able to give
That'd be
it.
great.
Again, I
That'd
want to
be
be
great.
clear. The good news is,
There's
that-
one.
right, A, and B, I thought that, while I wish this committee had started meeting knowing the fact that the town was about to take ownership of a building from the school department, they knew about it 5 years ago. But, while I wish that committee had been, let's say, July 1, I think is when the town took over that building, that committee could have been meeting already, or at least been ready to start meeting July 2. Here we are in February 7, and it's not clear as to when they're going to start meeting. So it's been less than a year since the building is now being paid for out of the town's budget and not the school department's budget.
And at the same time, at their first hearing that they had, the schools came out and said, hey, we might be interested in this little piece of property with regards to Margaret E. Small
Right,
and
and that
developing.
is-
So
Yeah.
I look at the bigger picture of all of them. I mean, all right, you knew you were going to close this school how many years ago, and now you're going to say, hey, by the way, we might want this piece of land? And the town knew we were going to close this, and now we're going to start putting it, so, I mean, I think we can all shoot each other on this delay of action here that, I like their approach now. I think what they've done made a lot of sense to start, I mean, having gone through the process that we went through with the drive-in site, we spent 3 years just trying to get our hands around what potential things, and we were restricted by Article 97. They don't have those kind of restrictions there, so I mean, you really could look at it and say, all right, we've got an empty canvas here, but you're going to spend 3 years trying to figure out how to paint around the edges and through that process. So I commend town staff for what they've done. I think it's a good approach to, but again, I still think that a planning board member should be a representative of that committee.
Madam
Not
Chair-
me, by the way.
Yes. Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me, to bring it up.
Obviously will.
But I just think it's relevant, given, again, I totally agree with you that the other committees that you mentioned earlier are important. I just find that we're in a unique position, again, much like CBC and much like the Finance Committee, where we cut across the entire town. And I'm not saying that Recreation doesn't, or CEDC doesn't, but we do it at, as you said, a 25,000-foot view. And there are also some times where we get to get right down into the muck. And I don't think there are many committees that really can say that they do that. And given the stakes and given the nature of the stakes for this future of this property, I will just say this as my, as in a parental way, I am disappointed that we were not looked upon in the same way as our friends at the CBC and the Finance Committee, who are wonderful people. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. I think that was a tie, Kathy.
Susan Britta,
Give it to Jim.
Aye.
Will Rubenstein.
Aye.
Jim Saban,
Absolutely.
Ken Smith,
Aye.
Joanne Crowley, yes. Thank you all.